Again, thank you, Margaret, for this amazing privilege. And Joe, thank you for the class I had with you and Ted in simulations. It's good to see you again. David Brooks wrote an article in the New York Times several months ago on what's the difference between a resume and a eulogy. And it's a fascinating article. He says most people spend their lives building their resumes when what counts is their eulogy. Now, Ted had an amazing resume, and people like Linda Cannell and others will remind us of the prolific writing and the honors that he's had over the years. But the things that will last, I'm convinced, are not his resume, although I hope those last for quite a while as well. Not the articles in the resume, not his positions, not his teaching, but the thing that will last will be the legacy that he has left that has come out in so many of the eulogies. Ted has influenced probably hundreds and hundreds of people directly, but then the people who have influenced them and influenced the next generation, my hunch is that there are several million people in the world today that have been profoundly influenced by Ted Ward. It's sort of interesting. When I teach some of my students at Trinity, they said, "You studied with Ted Ward? That means I'm Ted Ward's grandchild." And then I see these students, people like, different students. I wouldn't mention some of their names, but they are now having an amazing impact. Some of my students are having an amazing impact all over Latin America. I'm thinking of Lisa Anderson, Umania, and how she is having the impact on Christian camping in all of Latin America. And so I did a seminar with Latin American Christian camping people, and they said, "Oh, you studied with Ted Ward, and Lisa studied with you. That means we're Ted Ward's great-grandchildren." And so, I mean, you look at this and you see the powerful influence that he's had. Ted had a reputation at Michigan State of being a bear. Did you know that? I actually had 4 dissertation proposals before he finally accepted the 4th one. Now, he's the only person I know who could criticize my dissertation proposal and make me feel good about it. He said, "Jim, this is okay. I like what you're doing here, but you are really smart. You could do a lot better than this." So he was tearing me apart at the same time saying I could do better. And then I'd turn in the next. This wasn't just a minor revision of the first dissertation. It was it was a totally different subject. And he said, "Oh, that's a little closer, but you can still do better than this." Finally, the 4th one he agreed with, and I look back and say, this was wonderful. I am so glad that Ted, he didn't tell me what to do, but he encouraged me and led me in that direction. The first time we met Ted was in Nigeria. He and Sam Rowan came to do a seminar on program instruction and theological education by extension. One thing about Ted that I admire so much, and Margaret, you remember we were sitting in your living room a couple months ago, he was telling about his book burning activities. Margaret's nodding her head. Ted had some brilliant ideas, but he also had some horrible ideas. But the genius of Ted was that he knew which ideas really worked, which ones weren't. And the ones that he didn't, he realized that they were not the kind of thing that really stood up to what he was concerned about. He'd burn his books. I mean, one of the few people I know who could change his mind and say, yes, I think I've gone beyond that now. Very few people do that. They keep defending the past. And so Ted came to Nigeria to talk about program instruction and theological education by extension, and we just had a wonderful time. But this revamped how we were writing curriculum for the Nigerian church, the evangelical churches of West Africa. Today there are over 8,000 churches with several million people attending every Sunday. And the material that's being used in the Sunday school and the youth fellowship and the women's fellowship has Ted's imprint on this. I was in Nigeria just a couple of years ago, actually, and working with Christian education organizers. My wife and I helped to start the Christian education department for ECWA. I went back this last time I was supposed to talk to the Christian education organizers for the whole denomination. And it ended up that there weren't 20 or 30 that I thought there would be. They said, we have 1,500 Christian education organizers for ECWA. We wrote curriculum for the government schools in religious knowledge, used hundreds and hundreds of thousands of copies sold. And this is Ted's influence, indirectly. And so you look at this, at the global impact of the stories here. We also had a lot of fun with Ted. My wife told me not to tell this whole story, so if you want to know it, I'll tell you later. But we had one evening at our house. Margaret's saying no as well, so I won't. But we were just having the best time at our house in the evening. We were so loud. Sam Rowan was showing us card tricks. We were having the best time. And the neighbors came and knocked on the door, like we were making too much noise. Well, Sam had to put away his cards real quickly because that was not the kind of thing we did in SIM in those days. But we just had the best time together, this uproariously fun times together. I can remember, though, being at your house quite often. A lot of TED students, we would come over to your house in the evening, and we'd just sit around the living room and talk about the integration of faith and learning, the kind of thing that we wouldn't get necessarily in our development of religious knowledge and moral reasoning and all these kinds of things at Michigan State. So we'd come and talk about these things in your living room. And what a joy that was to have the kind of education involved here with Ted. The other thing I remember sitting in your living room, sitting next to him on the couch, him going through my dissertation line by line with a red pencil. I just wish that I had the patience to do that with my students. I just stand and say, what an amazing dissertation guide he was, how he worked with us in so many ways. The other comment, real quickly, was that he called me his colleague, not his student. He took me with him several times when he went to different places doing faculty workshops. I remember going to Malone College with him once. And I had a little cassette tape recorder, and so I decided to turn that on and just listen to him the whole ride talk. And I still listen to this tape. And I got to Malone, and he introduced me as Jim Plueddemann, my colleague at Michigan State. He didn't call me his student, I was his colleague. Everybody thought I was a professor at Michigan State, I think. And it was just amazing to how he treated his students as co-learners. We were working together on these things. We traveled together in several places, and again, it was always as an equal, not as this genius of a man that he was. One comment that he's made over the years that I have helped me in the many leadership positions I've had is he said, rock the boat, but don't tip it over. And I think that's typical of Ted, the idea of think big, think outside the box. Don't worry about critiquing the way things are. Look for a way they could be. But to do that, you're going to upset a lot of people. And so upset people, but don't turn the boat over. And so I think about this, the difference between a resume and a eulogy. And I think what it reminds us today is that we have one life where we can make a difference. And Steve, you talked about this a little bit. The difference we make is the difference we make in people's lives. And the difference that makes the difference for eternity is this kind of thing. I'd like to just close with a couple of verses from 2 Corinthians. It says, are we beginning to praise ourselves again like each other? And then it gets down and says, no, that's not it. We don't write letters of reference using paper and ink. And it says, this letter is written not with pen and ink, but with the Spirit of God, the Spirit of the living God. It is carved not on tablets of stone, but on human hearts. And Ted did that. He had an amazing resume, but his eulogy is that he, by the power of the Holy Spirit, carved on people's hearts in such a way that makes a difference for eternity. A phrase that has hit me many times, it's only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. And Ted lived a life that will last for eternity. Thank you.